Hey folks, welcome to another week of Spreading the Baseball News with Larry. I hope everybody is well. Originally today I was going to talk about what's going on in the second half of the season in Taiwan and focus on some of the players. Teams are doing well. Interestingly enough, the brothers are, spot of my hat, are in last place. Fubon Guardians are hanging in there. Rakuten's not running away with it. And Unilions, having a decent second half. Everyone's all just within a game or two of 500. Who are the hitters? Lin Lee still hanging in there. Lin Anke, probably a big reason why Unilions are hanging tough. However, I'm not really going to talk much about Taiwan today because last week there was some unfortunate news, which one of the great pitchers of baseball, Tom Seaver, passed away at the relatively young age of 75. And Seaver, is known as Tom Terrific, was really a great pitcher for the Mets and then later on the Reds and I think the White Sox. But what got me thinking about Seaver particularly is the issue of superstition in baseball. And I think, as I've alluded to, baseball players are both creatures of habit and are extremely superstitious. So if a player is doing well on a hot streak, they will stick to whatever habits they're in just to maintain that streak. Likewise, if they're cold, they'll try and change their habits so that they can break whatever lousy streak they're on. But one thing that I don't know if we're all aware of is not only are players superstitious, but so are fans. And I consider myself a rather rational person, likes data, and I'm not superstitious except when it comes to baseball. And I'm now going to tell you an example of my superstition, which relates to Tom Seaver, which is why I'm talking about this today. Back when I was growing up, when I was still a kid, the Mets, known as the Miracle Mets, were in a pennant race with the Chicago Cubs. And I went to a ball game at Shea Stadium, home is where the Mets play, and I went to a game with my sister, my older sister, and we were watching the Mets against the Cubs, and Tom Seaver was pitching. We happened to have been sitting on the third base side of the field, so we had a good look into the Mets dugout. And as the game's going along, the Mets got a couple of runs, the Mets were leading, and after about 5 innings, Seaver has a no-hitter going, and not just a no-hitter, but a perfect game going. And of course, all of you know the difference between a no-hitter is simply no hits. A perfect game is that no Chicago Cubs have reached base. And the crowd is getting a little bit more into it. And after the top of the 6th, again, Seaver retires to side 1-2-3. And now we can see, and there's certainly one of baseball's superstitions, that when Seaver goes into the dugout, none of his teammates would go near him, not even the catcher. No one would talk to him. And that's part of baseball ritual, part of baseball superstition. If a pitcher is pitching a no-hitter, especially a perfect game, no one wants to even talk to him. And pitchers have said once they get past the 5th inning, if they have a no-hitter going on, they're aware of it. And certainly everybody in the stadium is aware of it. So now we go through the 6th inning and Seaver retires aside. Mets bat in the bottom of the 6th, really irrelevant what they did. And we go to the top of the 7th, and after the first out, the crowd is really cheering because roughly the 59,000 people in the stands, I think all 59,000 people were aware of what was going on, with the possible exception of my sister. 2 outs in the 7th, and Seaver retires the second batter. So now, after the second batter is retired in the bottom of the 7th, the crowd is really cheering, and then Seaver retires the next batter, and the crowd is really cheering. So it's the 7th inning stretch, the middle of the 7th, and now I'm thinking to myself, the crowd is really cheering, not when the Mets get a hit, but when the Cubs make an out. And I'm thinking to myself that I hope my sister doesn't ask why the crowd is cheering, not when the Mets get hit, but when the Cubs make an out. Because if she does ask, she's going to jinx my superstition. She's going to jinx the perfect game, the no-hitter. And this I'm just thinking to myself. So now in the top of the 8th, the Cubs go down 1-2-3. The crowd is cheering after every out. Mets bat in the bottom of the 8th, and now we're going into the top of the 9th. And obviously the crowd is going crazy because everyone wants to see a perfect game. The first batter in the 9th inning is, I think it's Todd Hundley or Randy Hundley, the catcher for the Cubs. And as you know, catchers are generally not fast. However, Hundley lays down a bunt, and down the third base side, I think the Met third baseman at the time was probably Wayne Garrett, although I'm not sure about that. And he throws Hundley out. And now the crowd is booing, and they're booing because they know that Hundley was only trying to break up the perfect game. And no team wants to be no-hit or have a perfect game thrown against them. So the crowd, instead of cheering when Hundley made it out, they're booing him. And my sister turns to me and she says, "Why are they booing?" At which point I knew the no-hitter and the perfect game was doomed. And I had to explain why, which I did. I said, Seaver's got a perfect game going and the batter tried to break it up. So the next hitter that comes to plate is a guy named Jimmy Qualls, who was probably just called up about a week or 10 days ago from the minor leagues. Not a very great player. Well, you can imagine what I'm going to tell you. I'm not sure if it was on the first pitch, but Qualls breaks up the no-hitter. It's a line single, I think it was to left field. So much for the perfect game, so much for the no-hitter. So that's just an example where we as fans are also superstitious, not just players. To this day, I do believe that my sister is the reason that Tom Seaver didn't throw that perfect game. Just as a little anecdote, Seaver wasn't really, it's unclear whether Seaver was really annoyed or not by Qualls, but it's said that maybe in the same season, the Mets were in Chicago playing the Cubs, and just before the game, the Cubs are doing their warm-ups in the outfield, the Mets are doing their running, and as pitchers always like to run when they're not pitching. So he's running in the outfield, and he runs by Qualls, and he says to Qualls, "You son of a cost me $100,000. I don't know whether he said it or not, but he said it in jest because probably Seaver had in his contract a clause that if he pitched a no-hitter or pitched a perfect game, he'd get a $100,000 bonus. So I'd like to hear if any of you have any thoughts about superstition, whether you have your own superstitions about watching a game or what you think about players' superstitions in baseball. So look forward to your comments and see you all next week. 再见.